thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Mara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Karen Smith. Now, guys, today I'm going to leave the interview up to Cindy. She's going to be having a chat with the amazing Zen Honeycutt from the US. Now, Zen's actually the founder of Moms Across America. And I'm not going to steal any thunder. I just want to throw straight to you, Cindy. Go for it.
Welcome, Zen. Thank you for coming online all the way from America, from California, I believe.
Yes.
And also this is for my nutrition students that are at the Nutrition Academy. So let me just talk a little bit about you and then we'll get into asking you some questions. Zen is the founding executive director of Moms Across America, a non-profit national coalition of unstoppable feisty moms and author of the new book, Unstoppable, transforming sickness and struggle into triumph, empowerment, and the celebration of community. With the motto, Empowered Moms, Healthy Kids, Moms Across America has grown rapidly with over 600 leaders who have created 1,000+ community events in all 50 states in the first 5 years of its inception. Zen has 3 boys with allergies and autism symptoms, which greatly improved when they went GMO-free, which I've just seen you in a wonderful movie called Secret Ingredients, and organic. She discovered that thousands of mums are seeing the same results. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. It is such a pleasure to be with you and all of our friends in Australia. What a beautiful and diverse country that you have, and I really am honored to be able to connect with all of you.
Well, we hope to see you over here sometime.
Yes. Well, actually, I was there in 2014 or 15, I believe, and went to Melbourne and Sydney, and it was just fantastic. It's so eclectic and artistic and, amazing. So I would love to come back again soon.
So did you come for a holiday or did you do some advocacy?
No, we did advocacy. I toured with MADGE, which is Mothers Are Demystifying Genetic Engineering, and I spoke with Michael Antonou and Dr. Michelle Perro, and you can find those videos online on YouTube, on MADGE, and also on Moms Across America. And so it was great. It was a mom, myself, a doctor, and a scientist. And so I say that we're the new MDs, right? Moms, doctors, and scientists. We need to work together to really demystify what's going on with our children's health, because you have to come from all 3 angles. You really have to come from the science, from what's going on as far as the food supply, and the doctors, of course, with their expertise, and moms, what we're seeing every day with our children, and how important that is. We need to tell our doctors what we're seeing, and our doctors can actually learn from us, and then we can learn from our doctors. And of course, tying in the science is super important. So that was a great speaking tour, and met a lot of people who are very dedicated to health. And you can see some of those videos on momsacrossamerica.org.
Good. I'll make sure that I link that to the show notes so everybody knows. So let's talk about how you got into this. So met your husband, got married, had babies, and then what happened?
Well, when I had my first son, I was really dismayed to find that he was crying a lot, and he had bright green poop, and, he was very kind of colicky, and he just was not behaving in the way that I thought a baby should behave. And most people told me, oh, it's normal, it's fine. That's just the way it is. And so I just tried to power through it. But eventually, when he was about 18 months old, we did do allergy tests and found out that he was allergic to milk. And so I had to go, completely dairy free, or maybe actually might have been a little bit earlier, but, maybe 9 months or so. But I went completely dairy free. And then later on, when he was maybe 3 or 4, we had to go through the whole pin prick test, which was like torture, to find out that he was allergic to many other things, including nuts. And later on, when maybe he was 7, we found out he was allergic to wheat. And 22 other different food intolerances. And I was really dismayed because my husband and I did not have any food allergies. And, we had throughout our entire childhood had very good health. And so I did not know what was going on. And eventually when he was about 8 years old and he had a rash around his mouth and he looked at me and said, "Mom, I wish all my allergies would go away." And I said, "Me too, buddy." But in my head, I was thinking, that's never going to happen because the doctors had told me his allergies were only going to get worse. And that's why nut allergies are particularly life-threatening because every exposure gets worse, right? So in my head, I was thinking that's never going to happen. And then I realized what I was thinking in my head, that was very disempowering, right? That we were really just going to be victims of this for the rest of our lives if I took down that way of thinking. So I thought, wait a second, I'm committed to, courage and creativity and being a contribution. That's just what I have going on with me. And I said, if I came from that, like maybe we could make a difference with this. And I thought about my cousin Sarah, who had gone gluten-free for a year. And somehow she had maybe healed her stomach a little bit. And she was then able to eat gluten a little bit now and then, a year later. So I brought her up to my son, Ben, and I said, "Ben, would you like to be able to eat wheat?" Because that's one of the things he was allergic to. A year from now, like maybe a slice of pizza at a birthday party. And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, then would you be my partner in your health? Would you partner with me? Would you try anything, drink green drinks, alternative health, whatever it takes?" He said, "Yes." And then I said, well, then I shook his hand and I said, "I'm making a deal with you. I promise you will get better." Now that was scary for me because I didn't know how. I didn't have the answers, but I knew that if I made a promise with him and if we partnered together, that we would accomplish much more, right, than if we didn't. That, when you make a promise, you step up to the plate, right, especially with your children. So I knew that I would step up to the plate. And so I did that and began researching. And it really occurred to me that it was kind of weird that he could eat a hot dog one day, but the next day it would give him a rash. Or one day he could eat some type of luncheon meat and the next day it would give him a rash. And so I learned that he had a carrageenan allergy, which is a seaweed food thickener that's in just about everything that kids like ice cream and hot dogs and lunch meats and, anything saucy or creamy. And then I was like, well, why does he have a carrageenan allergy? What is, why? And I looked into the food supply and learned about GMOs. And later on, I learned more about glyphosate, which 80% of GMOs are engineered to withstand. And just began to research on the food supply. And once we went GMO free, his allergies dramatically reduced. And once we went fully 100% organic, which is connected to another story with my son, which I'll tell you later. But once we went fully organic, his allergies went from a 19 down to a 0.2. So he no longer has life-threatening nut allergies or frankly any allergies. And now he is 16. He is super healthy. He only eats organic. He's actually gone to vegan now as well. Or he likes to say whole food plant-based diet. And he's actually teaching us now. He's doing presentations for his family on the optimal diet to prevent heart disease, things like that. So he, is really super healthy and is inspiring us now in his health. And along the way, I created Moms Across America and got involved in more advocacy because I knew that this was important for everyone to learn, everyone to know that you can make a difference with your health.
So you had other troubles with your kids as well, your other two boys. I had the opportunity to meet the whole family when I was in the US, when I was touring with What's With Wheat, and it was such a joy to watch you speak and watch your movie and see what you were doing. And I, what I love the best is that we just met at a little community center, and I don't know, there was maybe 100 people in the room, maybe that, I can't remember. And I could just see you were just traveling in this mobile holiday home and just going to where people wanted to hear from you. So I know that you had, before we get on to Mums Across America, you had some other issues with health with your children as well, didn't you?
Yes, and that was a little bit later. My middle son was 8 years old, and he suddenly had an onset of autism symptoms. I didn't know what they were at first, but he was hitting and screaming and throwing tantrums, like a 2-year-old. He also had rashes, but he didn't have an allergy to carrageenan. So I was like, what is going on? And his grades plummeted from A's to D's. He was a straight A student before that, and he loved math. And he all of a sudden was getting D's in math. And his teacher actually called me and said, there's something going on with him. And my husband said, oh, it's just a phase. I said, no, there's really something going on with him. So I took him to the doctor, and the doctor tested his urine for fungus and bacteria. And I said, why are you testing him for fungus? He said, because an overgrowth of bad bacteria and fungus in the gut can lead to inflammation in the brain. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I had just learned that's what glyphosate does. And, glyphosate's in Roundup, and it's sprayed on GMOs, and it's also sprayed on wheat as a drying agent and other, legumes and beans and peas and garbanzo beans. And so that's what glyphosate does. It actually targets the beneficial gut bacteria and allows for an overgrowth of pathogenic gut bacteria, which leads to signaling the vagus nerve in the gut to tell the brain to go on attack. Like bad guys in the gut, attack. And when they go on attack in the brain, it causes inflammation on the neurons in the brain. And so a child can suddenly have very erratic behavior or memory loss problems, inability to focus, lack of eye contact. And so the child can suddenly have erratic behavior. So what he was describing to me was the same thing that I had been told that by doctors that happens with glyphosate. And I mentioned it to him. He did not know about it. We talked about it for 45 minutes. He said I should speak at a MAPS conference, like in front of doctors. And I couldn't, obviously, because I'm not a doctor. But he said, that sounds like a good idea. I've been telling my patients, because he was a doctor for autism patients. And my children didn't have autism, but we were going to him because he did a spaced out vaccine schedule. And I liked that. And so my son hadn't had a vaccine in probably about 3 or 4 years, but he had been eating wheat. And so I said, wait a second, he's my only son that's eating wheat. The other 2 sons have a gluten intolerance. And so I was like, I wonder if he's getting glyphosate through his diet through wheat. So around that time, I also had happened to bug a farmer for about a year and a half to help me find a lab which would test for glyphosate in children's urine, because I knew that we needed to connect this whole GMO glyphosate thing to what was actually going on with our children. I needed evidence of that. And he had come through. So it was right around the same time that I was able to send my son's urine into a lab to have it tested for glyphosate. And this was the first time this had happened anywhere in America. And he was the first one tested. And when his lab results came back, I was furious. He had 8.7 parts per billion of glyphosate in his urine. And that was 8 times higher than was found anywhere in Europe when Friends of the Earth did testing in Europe probably about a year before that. And so Roundup was in my son, Roundup weed killer. And we're not farmers. We didn't use Roundup. There was no reason for that to be in him except for the food supply, right? And we also tested the water around the same time, and the water had 0.08 or something parts per billion. So the water wasn't the only thing to blame, right? So there was definitely coming from another source. And so we knew that we pretty much knew that it had to be wheat because he was the only one eating wheat. And so we cut wheat out of his diet. We went completely organic with everything, even meat and dairy and everything. And he did need to take an antifungal because he had, when the results came back from the doctor, he had very high fungus levels. He had very high bacteria. He had C. diff. He had gut dysbiosis. He had leaky gut. He had 22 different food intolerances. And so we went completely organic for 6 weeks. We also cut sugar out of his diet because that can feed the overgrowth of bad gut bacteria. We put in sauerkraut, which has 1 billion good bacteria in each bite, and you need different kinds of good bacteria in the gut to restore the microbiome. And we did do an antifungal medication, which was $650 a month. So it was very expensive. There are other alternatives to compound medicines, like golden seal and other types of remedies that I didn't feel confident to try, but in hindsight, I might have tried that first. But of course, talk to your doctor about that. But we did that, and within 6 weeks, we retested him, and his glyphosate levels were no longer detectable, and his autism symptoms were gone and have never come back. And it's now been, I don't know, maybe 5 years. And so some of my, our supporters at Moms Across America or friends pay anywhere from 65,000 to 100-something thousand a year for therapies for their children with autism. And so I say that we can't afford to not eat organic, because I know in our family, we're not only saving thousands of dollars a year on allergy, doctor visits and sick visits. And, they used to get way more like earaches and nose, problems and just all kinds of sicknesses. They're not getting them anymore. We haven't had to go for a sick doctor visit in maybe 3.5 or 4 years. We haven't. They just don't. They went for poison sumac one time, and my son's been for the well checkups, because he's in sports, so he's been checked up for that. But they are really, really healthy now, and my son's back to A's and B's in school, and very socially, well adjusted, and active in many different activities, and he's just doing awesome. And so I know for sure that what we eat has the biggest influence, I believe, in what happens to our health, whether we're impacted by vaccines or antibiotics or toxins that, a neighbor's spraying or whatever it is, whatever impacted us to cause the problem, the solution really has to start with eating organic and eliminating that exposure to toxins in our gut, because our health really is founded in our gut. The Hippocrates and everybody, they were right. All disease starts in the gut. And so if we sort out the gut, no matter what the other health issue is, I really believe we can make huge strides in many different health issues.
Yeah, most definitely. It's interesting. I was watching you this morning on your Mums Across America, and there was somebody else that came on, and they were talking about hot dogs. And they said, oh, look at this, a natural hot dog, grass-fed, the whole lot. So I went to the website of the company and I read the ingredients. And when I read the ingredients, there was a flavor in there. There were extractives in there. There was all sorts of things in there. And I thought, right, I'll go to the patent. I'll have a look what's in this paprika extractive. And I read it and I went, how can they call this natural? The problem is that number one, people aren't educated about this. But number two, either of them food manufacturers. Because I've called them and I've said, can you tell me about your celery extract? Or can you tell me about your rosemary extract? Or can you tell me about this? Yes. They actually believe that it's a natural product because they're being told by the chemical companies that it is, even though it's genetically modified Escherichia coli or fungi or mold that's producing the product on a genetically modified substrate. And so it's like education, and that's what we do here at the Nutrition Academy, is that we are educating people. What I want to go to now is Moms Across America. How did that start? Whatever made you think of doing that? Because I watch you. You are everywhere with advocacy, not only about Roundup and glyphosate and food and non-GMOs, but also you are having mandatory vaccinations enforced in certain states of the US, and I'm noticing you there as well. I don't know what else you're advocating, but at that point, these are the two things that I watch you on, because you've been doing a lot of testing, and you have found glyphosate in vaccines.
Yes, I was really shocked, but actually not that shocked. I mean, because the ingredients are GMO. There's many ingredients, which I can't say are, but are likely to be GMO, because 80% of the crops to up to 100% of the crops of corn, soy, canola, like that and sugar are GMO in America. And so if you see an ingredient such as sugar or something derived from soy or corn or animal parts like bovine serum or eggs or, gelatin, which is from pigs, they are, you could practically guarantee that they're being fed GMOs, which are sprayed with glyphosate. And we know that glyphosate accumulates in animal body parts. And so the tendons that are in pigs are ground up to make gelatin, and then the gelatin is put in vaccines as a stabilizing agent. So in addition to the GMO ingredients, when I looked at those ingredients, I was like, wait a second, if there's GMOs in vaccine, there's a very high chance that there's glyphosate in vaccines. So I sent 5 childhood vaccines to a lab to be tested, and they all came back positive. And the MMR vaccine came back 25 times higher in glyphosate than the other childhood vaccines. And then I told a small group of scientists about this because I didn't want to come out with this information just with 5 vaccines. I thought somebody else has got to test and confirm this. And another scientist did test, Sam Sell, and he tested 14 vaccines. And I think the majority of them came back positive as well. And his MMR vaccine tested 34 times higher for glyphosate than the other vaccines. And this is significant because the MMR vaccine is the one that William Thompson, a whistleblower who works for the CDC, actually connected to gut issues and autism, especially in African American boys, that they had a higher risk of having autism when they got the MMR vaccine. And so I was floored because my children are almost fully vaccinated, right? Like I trusted my doctors. I thought it was the right thing to do. My kids got 5 or 6 vaccines in one shot. I didn't even know that they were getting probably 10 diseases at once. And I believe that was part of their allergies and their autoimmune issues and their autism symptoms. I think it's not just the health supply, the food supply. I think it is the combination of the toxins that they're getting from vaccines and the food supply and the air and our water and, toxins in pajamas and all that stuff, right? Like it's a toxic burden that is impacting our children. Now, the thing that's really significant about glyphosate being in vaccines is that glyphosate does break down the blood-brain barrier. So that means that other toxins that are accompanying that or are in your blood at the same time as glyphosate, the glyphosate will break down the blood-brain barrier and allow those toxins into the brain. And studies have shown that there are much higher levels of aluminum in children's brains that have autism and elderly people with Alzheimer's. And aluminum has replaced mercury in vaccines and most vaccines except for the flu shot. And in some vaccines, there can be 500 micrograms of aluminum. And the FDA themselves says that 25 micrograms is toxic. So how an infant could be getting a vaccine with that much aluminum in it and combine it with glyphosate, like that's just a recipe for disaster. Our 18-month-olds in the United States are getting 4,900 in either 23 or 25 micrograms of aluminum up until 18 months. So by 18 months old, they can be subjected to 4,923 or 25 micrograms of aluminum. That is insane. Like it's a miracle that children are not being harmed from that if they are not harmed. Now, there are certain children that are more at risk from harm from this type of injection of toxins, and that are children that have a mutated MTHFR gene. And that can be between 10 to 50% of the population. And I recently learned from Kaiser Permanente, they have a information sheet out about the MTHFR gene. And they say that Chinese women, 1/3 of Chinese women, and I'm half Chinese, have a mutated MTHFR gene. And so people of minority, it's called minority, really are the majority though. Hispanics and Asians are really the majority. But so we have a higher tendency to have this mutation, and Caucasians do not. It's more of like 10 to 15%. So my children are a quarter Chinese and about 30% Native American. So, and which I think is in the realm of, they classify as Hispanic or whatever. So they have a certain, percentage they have a higher percentage as well of having the mutated MTHFR gene. So, that to be injecting children with toxins, especially those that have the potential of having a compromised ability to detoxify, is very dangerous. So mandates are particularly dangerous for a certain portion of the population. And the problem is, of course, that when you mandate something, you're saying everybody has to get it regardless of your genetic disposition. And that's frankly anti-science, right? I mean, that's just chucking genetics and family history out the window and saying it doesn't matter. We're just going to force everybody to have a certain medical procedure because we think it will be for the greater good. Well, if it's not good for my child, I don't want to do it. And I have a right to say that my child will be injected or not injected with something. I believe that's my right as a parent. So, it's very concerning to us that glyphosate is contaminating so many things. We found glyphosate in breast milk. We found it in wine, beer. Other organizations have found it in crackers and egg, very high levels in eggs. And this is all non-organic, by the way. Some very small levels have been found in organic by contamination and drift and all that. So it's still way better to eat organic. But it's pervasive in our food supply, in our vaccines, and the cotton sanitary products, just all kinds of things are showing up positive for glyphosate. So this is why we're working so hard to have it banned. It really does need to be banned. And we sincerely hope that Australians will work hard to have it banned in their country. It is essential that it is banned and that they stop using this product. It cannot coexist. We're finding it in the rain. It's in the irrigation water. It's in the manure, the fertilizers that are used in our food supply. It's just pretty much everywhere. So it needs to stop.
Well, you'll be happy to know that there was a huge grain, I think it was called Summer Grains Conference on the Gold Coast over the weekend. And there was a gentleman that spoke who said, I don't care what you think about it, Roundup, whether you like it or you don't like it, or whether you agree with the science, you don't agree with the science, it will be banned and you need to be prepared. Yeah. So you'd be happy to hear that. And this was at a huge grain growing conference, and he didn't get into the what it does or how it does or anything like that. But he said it is at that point and you need to be ready for it. So I thought you'd be happy to hear that. I only heard it this morning. A friend of mine sent it to me who's a farmer, a broadacre farmer, and they're stopping it. They've already, they've been doing this for a while. But, yeah, she said, Cindy, you'll be so happy.
I am so happy because when I found out about GMOs, that was my focus, because they're genetically modified. They can cause genetic mutations. The third generation of rats or hamsters that ate GMOs were sterile. I was like, hell no, I want my kids to be able to have children someday and experience the profound love that it is to have their own child, right? So that was my focus, was getting GMOs out of the food supply, getting them labeled, and then getting them out of the food supply. And then I learned that not only they're engineered to withstand glyphosate, and they're sprayed with glyphosate, but that non-GMO crops are sprayed with glyphosate as well, as a drying agent, the wheat and the peas and the beans and legumes and sugar and all that. And so when I learned that, I said, oh my gosh, this is even bigger. Like you have to go organic to avoid not just GMOs, but glyphosate. And you have to go totally organic because it's so prevalent. And I told people that I was going to go after glyphosate, that we need to raise awareness about it. And they were like, oh, Zen, it's way too big. It's even bigger than GMOs. You're never going to make a dent in that. It's like $40 billion a year in profit. That's just, don't do that. You're going to, So I said, I don't care how hard it is. This has to stop. It has to stop. And we have to connect it to our children's health, because connecting it to the bees and the butterflies is not enough. Like, not enough people care about bees and butterflies to take action and, go to their senators and their representatives or stop buying certain foods. It has to be personal. It has to be about our children's health. And it really is about that now. 1 out of 2 of our children have a chronic illness in America. And I know it's not that far off in Australia. I went to one of the schools and I saw there were, like 30 something children's faces with the little EpiPen next to it. And these kids needed an EpiPen, in school in order to be able to make it through the day or their lunch, if they had an attack. And so it's happening around the world. And that's why this is really a global food issue, a global health issue. And mothers around the world, we have a subgroup called Mothers Across the World. Mothers across the world really do need to speak up and stand up and make a difference and demand that these agrochemicals are no longer in our food supply and GMOs.
Do you know what I find amazing is that mothers who are not doctors or scientists can speak up, because they can't be deregulated, deregistered, de-whatevered. They can speak up. So I contacted Christopher Exley in the UK and asked if I could interview him. But I can't until October because of things that are happening to him. And he's, the aluminium specialist. So what's good about mums and mothers is that we can speak up. We have some amazing mothers here in Australia that are speaking up on not only Roundup, like Madge with Roundup and GMOs, but also the vaccine issue. We've got a very, very strong young woman who actually just met Robert Kennedy in Samoa's, which is her home country, but lives in Australia. And they're the ones that can speak up, and they get messages from everybody all the time saying, thank you for speaking up. We can't speak up or I'll lose my job. I can't speak up or I'll be deregistered. I can't speak up or they'll take my funding, and so mums across America and mothers across the world, I didn't know they existed. I'm going to have a look at that, and we might need some mums across Australia.
Yes. Well, I believe there are some people who have asked about that. We might have made a little banner for them, and somebody may be going already. But yes, we all do need to speak up about this. It's extremely important, and that's really, you asked why I started Moms Across America. That's why I started Moms Across America, because I asked myself, how could we reach as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time? Because I want to be efficient, right? I'm a mom. I was also a waitress for 7 summers, right? Through college and all that. Like you got to be efficient, you got to get this done. So I asked myself that question after we lost the Prop 37 GMO labeling campaign, right? And so how could we reach as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time? And I thought of 4th of July parades here in America, in almost every town, at least every county. There's a 4th of July parade in their hometown. It's about 1.5 to 3 miles long, and people line the streets, and we have these banners and floats and all of that, and people join into parades, and people want to see people and their banners. And I'm like, how awesome would that be to have a banner saying something about moms, something about GMOs, so that, grandpa just elbows his wife and says, hey, honey, what's a GMO? Like, that's all we need to have happen. We need people to wonder, what are GMOs? And so I raised this issue with some activists that I knew at the time, Pam Larry, who started Prop 37, and Diana Reeves, who started GMO for USA. And they're like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. And so their encouragement had me just go for it and create a website called Moms Across America. And the event was called March to Label GMOs. So it was on the banner, said Moms Across America, March to Label GMOs. And that's really all we needed. And then we had flyers. I got together some information and put it on flyers. And we started a website. I started a website, and within 4 months, we had, and a Facebook page. And within 4 months, we had a reach on Facebook of over 300,000 a week. And it just took off. And I believe that that's because we had a date and a time, and we had an event that people could join easily. And it would be effective, because one parade, 3 people deep, right, 3 spectators deep on each side, means reaching about 30,000 people. So even if it's a small parade, 1.5 miles and 1 or 2 people deep, right, you're still going to reach 5,000 to 10,000 people. And you're going to do it in a family-friendly way. It's not a protest where people are trying to put their windows up because you're shouting at them. They're applauding you. They're like, yay, go moms. And you're like, yay, and you've got your band, and you could hand out flyers. And it's super fun. Like, I didn't even think about the whole applauding thing. But when it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so moved, because I thought about the other 179 groups across the country that were marching in parades at that same time that day, or, on the same day, that they were being applauded for their efforts. Because when are activists ever applauded? They're not. They're shunned, they're like, oh, those wacky people with too much time on their hands, So that was a special treat. And we had, 179 groups join in that first year, and in 37 states. And then in the next year, I think it was maybe 120 something. And it's definitely fewer now, but now more groups are taking us on for health freedom. And for other issues, like we noticed that there was a group in Washington, D.C., the third year, that just wanted to get leaf blowers out of their county. And they did that. So leaf blowers, they were like, just marching about leaf blowers. So you can get into a 4th of July parade here in America on all kinds of different issues, but most people don't usually think about doing that. They don't think of it as a place to reach people for an advocacy issue. And more groups are doing that now, especially, gun issues and, different types of maybe suicide issues, things like that. So people are reaching out more through 4th of July parades, and it's very exciting. It's a lot of fun. It's very effective. And since then, I realized it had to not just be a one-time event. It needed to be a nonprofit. So at first we had a fiscal sponsor for about 3 years, and then eventually we segued into our own nonprofit, and we're able to raise money through individuals, sponsors, and we have a health solution store where we sell products that pertain to mostly our gut, because that's what I needed when my children, were faced with these issues. So we have a handful of products that we sell as a fundraiser, and they fulfill on our mission to create healthy communities. And we're very selective, and they're very highly vetted, and they are really our breakthrough technology, like really some of the best technology out there. So we're very happy that our supporters can support us through the fundraiser and their own health. And so it's a win-win for everybody. So we've had, as you said, over 600 leaders now create over 1,000 events in the past. We're now on our 6th year, and it's very exciting to meet people across the country and around the world that are so committed.
So you also make pamphlets. I'm just trying to, so I do have it. I got to show you this then. Mm-hmm. So you gave me a whole bunch of these pamphlets.
Oh, yes, the White Eater pamphlets, yes.
Yeah, so you also have them online so that people can get them and get them in groups of like 100 or more, and they can give them to their communities, they can give them to their counsellors, they can give them to whoever it is. When you did your first 4th of July parade, did you have the banners ready for everybody? Did you send them out? Is that how you did that?
So and I want to be clear, we joined into parades, right? So we didn't create the parades. They were already happening. And you can do this with sports events or street fairs or any type of event, right? That's a big event that's happening in your city. You can just join in and pass out flyers or have a booth. And so what we did was, yes, I had a graphic designer design a banner, and we put it on our website. And the first year, I believe, we did print up these banners because you can get a cheaper price bulk, right? So I think we printed up, 100 of them. I think we had a goal of 100. And then we had people pay, I think it was $40 or something for a banner. If they did it in their hometown, it might have been $80 locally, because you could just download the graphic and print it out at your local Staples. And I think it would have been 60 or 80. So whatever the prices were, maybe it was even $35. I don't know, but they did have to pay for them the first year, and because we didn't raise a bunch of money. But I think we did send out the boxes of flyers for free. All they had to do was pay for shipping, which was about $20, and it was about 1,000 flyers. So we did sort that out, and over the years, it's still now $20 for a box of 1,000 flyers, and you can download the image for the banner, and you can print it now just locally. And I don't know if we get a discount, it can cost maybe $60 or something. So there is an investment to doing it, but most parades, they don't charge you to get in the parade. Maybe if there's a fee, it might be $15 or $30, something like that. So it's fairly affordable, and you can use that banner. If you do like a 6 foot by 2.5 foot banner, that's the perfect size for the front of a table for a booth. So you can use it at farmers markets or other, health fairs and things like that. And a lot of people are really happy and proud to do that, because they're just like patriotic looking banners, and they're not scary or anything like that. It's approachable. So we had all of that on our website. I also designed, or had a graphic designer design T-shirts that say like GMO free mom, and label GMOs now. So we had T-shirts, we had banners, we had flyers, we had buttons and stickers, and eventually we had aprons. So you could just wear an apron that says Organic Chef. So yeah, we have a whole collection of tote bags and things like that on our website. And all the T-shirts are organic, the aprons and the bags too. So it's been a lot of fun. My background is in fashion design and product design. So that came in handy with doing all this, knowing like what colors and graphics that I wanted and things like that. So that has come in very handy.
Yeah. And is this a full-time job?
Yes, it is. It is now. It's pretty much from the get-go was a full-time job. Thanks to my husband's job, I was able to just do this for 3.5 years, volunteer. And then he lost his job, and I believe it was not just a coincidence. He lost his job 2 weeks after we put banners up outside of Monsanto during the shareholder meeting that basically said GMOs and, glyphosate are toxic or something like that. And our children get better when they eat organic. Invest in the future, right? Invest in organic. And it was something shorter than that, but that was the gist of it. We put that billboard up right outside of Monsanto's headquarters during their shareholder meeting. I don't think they liked that. And 2 weeks later, my husband was let go, and this was during a reorg of about 300 people, and he was the only one let go. Monsanto happened to be one of the company's clients. And he did not work with anybody from Monsanto. He was an IT guy, a software guy. But it was just very odd and coincidental that, an outside person came in and reorged the company, and my husband was the only one let go. So we lost our source of funding for me to be able to do what I do. But we had funders step up and said, this is too important. We need to keep doing this. So we're able to pay the rent now. And, we don't make a lot of money from doing this, but it's so important, I think, that we continue to do this and we make it work, and I told my husband at the time, I don't care if we have to live in an RV, we're still eating organic, we're going to find a way to make this work. And so he did, and he got training. He decided not to go back to some, biotech job or pharmaceutical job. There's a lot of those types of companies in our area. And he got training with search engine optimization. And so now he has a company called Organic Results, and he supports websites to increase their traffic to their website. He does a great job for Moms Across America with that. And so we get to work together, and he consults with other companies where he really believes in what they do, And so we are now able to be with our kids. And if we want to travel, we can travel. And we mostly travel to raise awareness about, Moms Across America. Don't have many vacations where we're not doing a talk or something like that. But it's really wonderful that we get to work together and fulfill on what we believe is our mission in life to really, really help create healthy communities. So I have it that if you do what you love, all the world will conspire with you. It really will. It just find that thing that matters to you. Be confident about it, speak passionately about it, clearly know what you're talking about, get your education and then just go for it and say, I'm going to do something. And the bigger that thing is, the more inspiring it will be, and the more people will be likely to want to work with you or to support what you're doing or to purchase your products, because you're up to something big, and you're up to something that's bigger than you. And something that will make a difference for them and their community and for, really the world. So I really encourage people, especially your students who are, in this world of health and solutions. And, there's a lot of struggle. Just keep going and just trust yourself and keep doing it and be vocal. And so what if you're like the weird anti-GMO lady or the weird organic lady, awesome, do that, and be the one. I would prefer to be in a room with 1,000 people that don't know about GMOs than to be in a room with 1,000 people that do know about GMOs, right? Get away from birds of a feather flocking together thing. That's great. Go and do that and get recharged, but then get out in the world and be the one that is speaking, that's upsetting the apple cart, right? The one that is speaking to the opposite of what big pharma and big ag and big oil want us to speak about. We really do need to disrupt what's going on because corporate corruption is killing us. And it's up to us, I believe, women and mothers primarily, parents to protect our children and protect the future of our countries and of the world.
I think there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance and just looking the other way for a lot of people. Sometimes it gets really frustrating, and I know my students will be feeling this and my graduates, that we get a little bit frustrated by they think you're crazy, like the whole glyphosate, Roundup, GMO. They just think you got to be in your bonnet. When I was fighting the council 4 years ago, I started, and now they've stopped using it. Yeah, I know, but they're not telling anybody yet. So all my students will know this, but they're trialing a new contact organic product, but they're quietly confident and they're not telling anyone yet. I don't know why, but they're not. But when I started 4 years ago, I heard from a counsellor who said, "Oh, they just think you've got to be in your bonnet, Cindy."
Yes.
It's like they just, let's just flicker away, don't worry about her. And I went to a counsellor who is meant to be, the one that's wanting to look at things naturally. And she said, "Oh, Cindy, we've been working on this for 5 years." And I went, 5 years? You give me no hope.
Yeah.
But I loved that ending that you just did then, because that's usually the question I ask is, have you got any wise words of wisdom? And you did the best
anyway.
of your wise words of wisdom, so I don't have to ask you that question. I just think that if people listen to you and realize that there is things out there bigger than ourselves, and we need to have a voice and we need to, speak up. And, the Nutrition Academy is a group of people that do speak up about food. We talk about the organic, non-GMO, non-glyphosate, non-Roundup, and the other 596 registered products in Australia with glyphosate in it. Yeah. Our regulatory bodies aren't doing much at all about it, but they will. We know they will.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, the trick is to be unstoppable about it. That's why my book is called Unstoppable. It's no matter what they say and no matter what they call you, right, or how you feel about what they're saying, about you, is to stay committed. It's to continue taking actions based on the future that you want to create, not actions based on the current circumstances. Because the current circumstances right now, let's be honest, there's no agreement in the current circumstances. There's hundreds of millions of glyphosate being used in our country. And your country, most likely 200 million, pounds or something a year in the United States. There's no agreement for banning glyphosate. There's no agreement for no GMOs. It's just so overwhelming and so big. It doesn't seem like it's a smart thing to do if you want to win and you want to be right to go up against these things. But and I don't mean right. I mean, if you want to be successful, right? It seems like a very daunting and overwhelming and not likely task to take on. But to me, that doesn't matter. What matters is what's in the best interest of our children. A mom's only special interest is the well-being of her children. It's not that way for corporations. Their special interest is the increased profit of their company. And so, but what the advantage that we have is that our source of motivation will never end. We love our children and our families so much. We are unstoppable because of that. We will not just give up. And I'm sure all of your students, when they learn something, it just adds more fuel to the fire for them. They just become more armed with, the truth and the facts, and they become more empowered. And that's what we need to do, is to continue to share that, because your students and people like our supporters are the ones bringing the truth to the people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I can guess that the media is probably not telling people the truth about what's going on in the food supply. And for the most part, maybe they are now with glyphosate because of the lawsuits. But for the most part, the major media here in the United States, 70% of the commercials are big pharma. So funded, so of course they're not going to tell the truth about what's going on with pharmaceuticals or their sister companies, which own pesticides and GMOs, right? The media is not going to tell the truth about that. So no matter what happens, how we're going to win and how we're going to make progress is to continue to be unstoppable, to continue to take actions based on what we're committed to. I'm committed to health and freedom, right? I'm committed to empowering community leaders to be global game changers. And I know you are too, through your education, right? You want to empower people locally, and so that they will go out and not just make a difference in their family and in their community, but it will ripple effect throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And we see that happening, right? We see that happening with people. I met this lovely woman from Uganda in Australia when I was there. Her name is Alice, and her video is on YouTube. And she is now educating people, in Africa and in many other places about the dangers of GMOs and glyphosate. And it's happening around the world. We are educating people. So I would invite every single person to see themselves in the same way. There's nothing special about me except that I'm willing to speak up. I have no background in creating a nonprofit or marketing or, a big event like this. I just said, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to mess up. I'm willing to look bad. I'm willing to fail, because so what? It's not about me. It's about this future that I want to create. It's about my children. It's about your children. It's about, us being healthy. So I'm just going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So if your students decide that they're the ones to make a difference in a particular area, whether it's getting GMOs out of the school or getting glyphosate like you did out of your town, right? Or having a certain senator or representative create a bill to ban glyphosate or, all toxic chemicals, right? If they just say, I'm the one that's going to do this, they will inspire other people to get on board with them, and you will make progress. That's just the way it works. It just takes one person to start, and you will inspire other people to take action too. So I'm very grateful to be able to talk to you and to your students, and really appreciate this time with you.
Well, you're such an inspiration. So if my students want to get your book, is it on Kindle? Is it in Australia? Do we go to Moms Across America?
Yes. So you can link to it from Moms Across America. It's sold on Amazon. I believe it is on Kindle. There's like a downloadable ebook. There's also a mini ebook. If you sign up for our newsletter, you get access to a free mini ebook. It's a couple chapters from it. And and I hope your supporters read it and enjoy it and learn about how not only we got started, but how the entire community is working together. I source farmers and scientists and doctors and lawyers in the book, and really tell the whole story about the community that has come together to create a healthier food supply and health in America and around the world. And of course, I mentioned Mothers Across the World and my trip to Australia and New Zealand and China and Japan and Korea and places like that too. So it's really a global effort. Yeah,
well,
I've been proud to be a part of.
Thank you, Zen Honeycutt. You're an inspiration, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Cindy, that was an amazing interview. And oh my goodness, Zen is just an incredible person. We are so blessed to have shared the show with her. So for all of our guys and all of our listeners that are interested to post your comments, questions or concerns, ideas, thoughts, all of it, head on over to our Facebook page, allthews.facebook.com/up for a chat, or you can head on over to allthews.thewellnesscouch.com/up for a chat. But most importantly, everybody, make sure you give us a 5-star rating when you jump into iTunes. And also make sure that you tune in here next week, right here on Up for a Chat, where you get to become part of the ripple effect that's changing the world. We're going to see you on the ride. Bye for now, everybody.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.